My boyfriend slid a ring onto my finger 3 weeks before my father's estate cleared probate. I should have noticed the timing. I didn't. I was too busy crying happy tears in the middle of a candlelit rooftop in Denver, surrounded by string lights he'd paid a friend to hang, while Marcus knelt in front of me, holding a ring that cost more than his monthly salary as an insurance adjuster. I remember thinking, he must have saved for months for this. I remember thinking I was the luckiest woman alive. I was 36 years old. My name is Claire Whitfield, and I run a small architecture firm out of a converted warehouse in the Reno district. 3 employees, a handful of loyal clients, and a father who had died 8 months earlier from a heart attack that took him in his sleep. My mother had passed when I was 22. My father, Walter Whitfield, had spent 30 years building a modest but steady real estate portfolio, 4 rental properties, a paid-off house, and just under $2 million in investment accounts. He'd raised me alone. He'd never remarried. And when he died, all of it came to me. Marcus Doyle and I had been together for 14 months when he proposed. We met at a friend's barbecue. He was charming in the easy way some men are, quick with a joke, attentive without being smothering, the kind of man who remembered your coffee order after hearing it once. My friends loved him. My assistant Priya loved him. Even my father, in the last few months of his life, had shaken Marcus's hand and told me, "He's got kind eyes, Claire. That matters." I believed that too. Right up until the night I found the folder. It was a Tuesday in March, 4 months after the wedding. Yes, we married fast, 3 months after the proposal, a small courthouse ceremony because Marcus said he didn't want to wait, didn't want some big production standing between us and being married. I thought it was romantic. I was folding his laundry because I still did things like that for him, still tried to be the wife who made his life easier, when a folded piece of paper fell out of his jacket pocket and landed face up on the carpet. It was a printout from an estate attorney's website. Highlighted, in yellow marker, was a single paragraph about elective share laws, the legal right a surviving spouse has to claim a portion of an estate, even against the terms of a will, even against a prenuptial agreement in certain circumstances. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up. We didn't have a prenup. Marcus had said, gently 2 weeks before the wedding, that suggesting one would feel like planning for failure. "I don't want to start our marriage assuming it'll end," he'd told me, holding my hands across the dinner table. "I love you, Claire, not your father's money." I remember exactly how his thumb traced circles on my knuckles when he said it. I stood there in our bedroom holding that piece of paper, feeling something curdle in my chest. Then I heard his car in the driveway. I shoved the paper back into the jacket pocket, exactly the way I'd found it, folded the same way, and went downstairs and made dinner like nothing had happened. That night, lying next to him in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and started, for the first time in our relationship, to actually think. The next morning, I called my father's old attorney, a sharp, silver-haired woman named Denise Ashworth, who had handled the Whitfield family's legal matters for over 20 years. I told her I had questions about my estate, quietly, without explaining why. "Claire," she said carefully, "did something happen?" "I found something," I said. "I need to understand what my husband would be entitled to if anything happened to me, or if we divorced." There was a pause on the line. "You didn't sign a prenuptial agreement?" "No." "Then legally, depending on how assets were commingled during the marriage, he could have a claim to a significant portion. Have you moved any of your father's assets into joint accounts?" My hand went cold around the phone. 4 months earlier, right after the wedding, Marcus had suggested so casually, over wine, like it was nothing that we combine our finances the way real married couples do. He said it would simplify our taxes. He said it would make us feel like a team. I had moved $60,000 from my personal savings, inherited directly from my father, into a joint checking account we now used for household expenses. "Some," I admitted. "Not much." "Even not much can matter," Denise said. "Claire, I don't want to alarm you, but I think you and I should talk in person, soon." I didn't go home that afternoon. I told Marcus I had a late client meeting, and instead I sat in Denise's office, across from her mahogany desk, watching her flip through documents with the calm precision of someone who had seen this story before, many times, with different names attached to it. "I want to show you something," Denise said, turning her laptop toward me. "I did some quiet digging this morning, using public records. Nothing invasive, just background." She pulled up a name. "Your husband was married before." I blinked. "No, he told me he'd never been married." Marcus Doyle, age 39, married in 2016 to a woman named Renata Castillo in Scottsdale, Arizona, divorced in 2019. She turned the screen further. Renata Castillo's family owned a chain of dental clinics, fairly wealthy. The divorce filing includes a dispute over an inheritance she received from her grandmother during the marriage. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the arm of the chair. "There's more," Denise said, her voice gentler now. "There was a restraining order filed against him in 2019, later dropped, and a civil suit settled out of court regarding funds withdrawn from a joint account without the other party's knowledge." I sat in silence for a long moment, listening to the tick of a clock somewhere behind me. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "Denise, do you think he married me for my father's money?" She didn't answer right away. She was a careful woman, not prone to speculation. But finally she said, "I think you should stop trusting your instincts about his intentions and start trusting the paper trail instead. Paper doesn't lie, Claire. People do." I drove home that night rehearsing what I would say to him. And then, somewhere on I-25, I changed my mind entirely. If Marcus had done this once before, married a wealthy woman, positioned himself near her inheritance, then extracted money before the relationship collapsed, then confronting him would only make him careful. It would make him hide his tracks better. And worse, if I filed for divorce now, in anger, without protecting myself first, I could hand him exactly the leverage Denise had warned me about. So instead, I did something that surprised even me. I went home and I kissed him hello. I asked about his day. I let him believe nothing in our marriage had changed, and I started paying attention like I never had before. Over the following 6 weeks, I built a quiet, careful record of my own marriage. I noticed things I'd been too in love, too grateful, too distracted to notice before. Marcus had insisted, early on, that he handle boring stuff. Our joint account logins, our tax paperwork, the paperwork for refinancing my father's rental duplex under both our names, which I now realized I'd signed without reading closely, trusting him completely. I found, buried in a drawer in his home office one afternoon while he was golfing, a manila folder labeled simply CW. My initials containing photocopies of my father's original will, printouts of the property deeds to all 4 rental units, and a spreadsheet in Marcus's handwriting, tracking the estimated total value of my inheritance month by month, updated as recently as 2 weeks earlier. There was also, tucked at the back of the folder, a printed email exchange between Marcus and a man named Todd Reyes, a real estate contact of his, discussing flipping 2 of the properties once things are finalized, and timing it so Claire doesn't ask too many questions during the transition. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down on the floor of his office, the folder open across my knees, my back against his desk. Transition. What transition? I hadn't discussed selling anything. I hadn't agreed to any of it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside a man I now understood to be a stranger, listening to him breathe evenly beside me, and I thought about my father, about the 2 decades he'd spent building those 4 properties, one careful purchase at a time, working weekends, skipping vacations, so that I would have something solid beneath me when he was gone. And I thought about how close I had come to letting a con artist quietly sell it out from under me while calling it our future. I went back to Denise the next morning and told her everything. "You need documentation of your own," she said. "Not just what you found in his office that could be disputed as circumstantial. You need something undeniable, something in his own words, in real time." That's when she told me about a legal, entirely above-board strategy that some of her clients had used in similar circumstances, installing a simple, disclosed, home-secured camera system, the kind anyone might install for safety reasons in common areas of the house, not to spy in a legally gray way, but as a homeowner protecting her own property, in a state where one-party consent for audio recording was legal, meaning I only needed my own consent to record conversations I was part of. I told her I felt sick about it, sneaking around my own marriage like a detective. "You're not sneaking," she said. "You're protecting what your father spent his life building. There's a difference." I installed 2 small cameras myself the following weekend, while Marcus was at a fantasy football draft with friends, one in the entryway, one in the kitchen, both visible if anyone looked closely, both technically disclosed under Colorado's 2-party notice laws for common areas, which Denise walked me through carefully to make sure I stayed entirely within legal bounds. Then I waited. It took 11 days. Marcus had a habit, I'd learned, of taking phone calls in the kitchen while pacing, gesturing with his free hand the way people do when they think no one's watching. On a Thursday evening, while I was supposedly at a client dinner but had actually left 20 minutes early and was sitting quietly in my car outside, watching the live camera feed on my phone, I saw him pick up his cell phone in our kitchen. "Todd, relax," he said, laughing, pacing near the window. "The duplex on Ferris is basically done. I've got her trusting me with everything now, all the account logins, the property paperwork. I just need 6 more months before I push the sale long enough that it doesn't look suspicious. After the 2-year mark, if things go sideways, I walk away with half of everything under the marital laws here anyway. Either way, I win." My whole body went cold and still, like something outside myself was watching my own hands grip the steering wheel. "And if she finds out?" Todd's voice, tinny through the speaker, asked. Marcus laughed again, easily, the same laugh that used to make my chest warm. "She won't. Claire's smart about buildings, Todd, not people. Her old man raised her to trust the wrong things." I sat in my car for 11 minutes without moving. Then I drove to Denise's office instead of home, and I played her the recording. She listened to it twice, completely silent, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up at me and said, "Claire, this changes everything. This is exactly what we needed." Over the following 2 months, with Denise's guidance, I did not confront Marcus. I did not raise my voice. I did not give him a single reason to suspect anything had shifted. Instead, quietly and legally, I moved every piece of leverage into place. I contacted my father's original attorney's firm and had them formally re-verify the original terms of my father's will, confirming that his estate had explicitly named me, not any spouse, current or future, as the sole beneficiary, with language specifying the properties were to remain separate property under Colorado law, regardless of marital status, since my father, ever the careful man, had actually included that clause years earlier, back when I was engaged to a different man entirely, someone he'd never fully trusted either. I quietly consulted a forensic accountant who traced the $60,000 I'd moved into our joint account and confirmed on paper exactly how much of it Marcus had personally spent, nearly $18,000 on things that had nothing to do with our household. A solo trip to Cabo, he'd told me, was a work conference. A leased BMW registered in his name only, and 2 separate payments to a woman named Ashley Kern, which the accountant flagged without comment, letting the number speak for itself. I filed, discreetly, for an uncontested legal separation of the joint account, citing financial irregularities, which under Colorado law I was entitled to do without his signature once I demonstrated cause. And I had Denise draft, ready and waiting, a full divorce filing built on a foundation so solid that no attorney Marcus could hire would find a foothold. A recorded confession of intent to defraud, documented misuse of marital funds, evidence of a prior, strikingly similar pattern with his first wife, and an ironclad pre-existing will explicitly protecting my father's estate as separate property. The only thing left was choosing the moment. I chose a Sunday morning, 3 days after our second wedding anniversary, deliberately after the 2-year mark he'd mentioned on that call, so he could never again claim he'd been planning to leave anyway. I made him his coffee the way he liked it, sat down across from him at our kitchen table,
and set two things in front of him, a manila folder and my phone, already cued to the recording. "What's this?" he asked, still smiling, still certain of himself. "Play it," I said. I watched his face while Todd's tinny voice filled our kitchen. I watched the exact moment his jaw went rigid, the exact moment the color left his face, the exact moment he understood that the woman across from him, the one he'd called smart about buildings, not people, had been 3 steps ahead of him for months. "Claire," he started. "Don't," I said. My voice didn't shake. I'd practiced that part the most. "The duplex on Ferris isn't for sale, none of it is. My father's estate was never yours to plan around, Marcus. It was never marital property to begin with. There's a clause protecting it, written years before I even met you. Every dollar you spent from our joint account I have documented. Every call, every email with Todd Reyes, every detail of what you did to your first wife Renata, I have that too." His face cycled through disbelief, then anger, then something smaller and more desperate. "You had no right to record me. One-party consent state," I said. "I checked extensively." I slid the divorce papers across the table. "You have 2 options. Sign these quietly today and walk away with nothing but your own belongings and whatever dignity you can manage. Or fight me, and I hand this recording along with everything else to my attorney, who will make sure a judge hears every word of it, and I'll make sure Renata Castillo's attorney gets a copy too, since I imagine there's still an open question about what happened to money that went missing during your marriage tour." Marcus sat very still for a long time. Then, quietly, he signed. He moved out within the week. I heard, through a mutual friend 6 months later, that he'd left Denver entirely, that things hadn't worked out with Todd's real estate scheme, that whatever version of this plan he tried next hadn't found solid ground. I kept the house, I kept the duplex on Ferris, and the other 3 properties my father had spent his life building. I sold the leased BMW situation into a headache that became entirely Marcus's problem, not mine. Since it had never been in my name, I won't pretend the months after weren't hard. There's a particular kind of grief in losing a marriage to discover it was never what you thought, grief for the version of your life you believed you were living, grief for your own judgment, grief you have to sit with even while you're doing the right thing. I saw a therapist every week for almost a year. I told my story exactly twice outside of that office, once to Denise, who already knew it, and once to my father's oldest friend, Harold, who had known Walter Whitfield since they were 25 years old, and who said quietly over coffee, "Your dad would be proud of how you handled that. Not the wedding, this part." I still run my firm. Business is steadier now than it's ever been a project last spring, renovating a historic bakery downtown, made the local paper. I still own every property my father built, and last year I finally understood what he meant years ago when he told me, gently after my mother died, "Build things that can't be taken from you, Claire, not just walls, foundations." I think about that folder sometimes, the one with my initials on it, the spreadsheet tracking my inheritance like livestock waiting for slaughter. I think about how close I came to trusting the wrong thing simply because it wore a familiar, comfortable face. But mostly, now, I think about Sunday mornings in my own kitchen, coffee in hand, sunlight coming through windows my father once stood beneath as a much younger man, believing, correctly in the end, that if he built carefully enough, patiently enough, honestly enough, nothing would ever be able to take it from the daughter he left it to. He was right.